Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out here at Kahia Creek today and we're finally getting to spend a day with the 2018 KTM 450 SXF Factory Edition. When the specs for this bike came out, I was a little bit taken back. KTM every 3 years has a Factory Edition bike that's radically new. Well, this one's new, but it's not as crazy as what they've done in the past, which when you think about it, isn't a bad thing. The current bike is fantastic. The Standard 18 did great in our shootouts. It's been a really well-received bike overall, done great in racing, so why do they need to overhaul it? They don't. They went ahead and focused on a few key areas. The biggest one when you talk to the engineers is they were really trying to just focus on the actual feel of the machine. This comes down to the new chassis, all the new body work, and just some of the adjustments to the suspension to really just try to take what looks like a new bike, but just trying to evolve what they already had. So let's kick off with the actual chassis. The swing arm itself is still the same casting. It is just 5 millimeters longer now. That's something the team requested. They've been wanting to run that rear wheel a little bit farther back. They feel like it just does better for the bike in faster conditions, gives a little bit longer wheelbase. The actual frame itself now is quite a bit different. All the angles, the thicknesses of the spars, the way they welded it and where they did it is all just a little bit different. Overall, the goal was to not decrease or increase what they called the longitude stiffness of the bike, the kind of front to rear flex. They wanted to keep the same, but they did want to change the torsional stiffness, the twisting of the bike. Where this is really noticeable on the track when you side load it, especially on the throttle, your rear steering and you start to load it, the old bike would give a little bit more and flex. The new bike feels more precise. It holds its line a little bit better. It just gives you more feedback and confidence as a rider. Now, what's interesting with that is I was opening up the high-speed compression a little bit to get to settle more, but I actually had to go a little bit stiffer on the low speed because the bike is so much more precise in the rear now. When you're really hard on the throttle, it's just loading the bike so much it was squatting down and wallowing a little bit. A couple clicks stiffer on low speed, we were able to get that bike balance back that I was looking for. So speaking of the chassis balance, how are we at the front of the bike? Pretty darn good. KTM has made a lot of steps with the AR48 air fork. This year they actually chose to go softer on the air pressure. They went from the 18 standard bike 10.8 bar to 10.5 standard on this bike. I actually went 0.3 less than that on the pressure, just trying to get the fork to move a little bit more. Even though the bike isn't any stiffer, supposedly from the frame front to rear, I felt like the front end was a bit more noticeable this year. There was a little bit more hold up. Open that up, try to get the fork to move a little bit more. With stiffening the rear, we just got the bike balance where it wasn't quite as choppered out, got it a little bit more settled. From there though, the actual movement of the stroke was all I was looking for. The progression, the plushness is all there. The rebound action, the way it tracks and follows the ground is just as good, if not better than the previous generation KTM. They've done everything they can to thin out the bike. The KTM by no means has been wide in the past, where you stand in the center of the bike around your knee area, but where they felt like it was too big and they were getting comments is as you got back on the bike or forward, they felt like they were tapering too quick. So what they've done is everything possible to wait as late as possible in the rear to expand for the exhaust, and going forward, they lowered the radiators 12 millimeters so the shrouds can kind of sit on top of them a little bit more and curve in, so it feels like that shroud doesn't get wide to the last possible second. Overall, just the bike felt more consistent in the general rider's compartment. The only really last thing key on is the engine. So like I said, there is some engine tweaks, but it was nothing that was really meant to change power output. Now on the Husky version of this bike, we noted that the actual hit and feel the engine wasn't any different other than it revved a little bit quicker. Now the KTM, I gotta say, actually does feel notably different from the Standard 18. I feel like it's a little bit calmer off the bottom, even in the most aggressive map. It doesn't have as much bark as the 18, but that's not saying it's mellow. It still revs up pretty quick. It has a lot of torque where it rolls on. It just has a cleaner roll on. It doesn't have the same flat to snap point that the old bike did, which is kind of interesting. The chassis itself, to me, can be ridden more aggressively on this bike, and the power characteristic being a little bit calmer allows you to ride the engine harder, which overall made me feel like on this KTM, I was able to ride it, dare I say, more like their 350. I felt like I was able to use more of the chassis, more of the engine, and more of the suspension. Anytime we start using the words aggression and stiffness when it comes to a 450, people can get a little bit taken back. I know they'll be like, 450 is already a lot. They're already fast. They've already got a lot going for them. Is this good or bad? It's interesting to explain it. I would say yes, this bike is better than the previous KTM. I would hands down take it over the previous generation. Why? Yes, the chassis is stiffer, but what it hands me surprisingly is more confidence, more precision. I feel like I can, and I feel like the majority of riders that would be on it would be able to push this bike harder. It's not so aggressive and stiff that it's beating you up. It's more the precision it offers back to the rider is what we're talking about, which all in all just gives you more confidence on the track and the ability to push the equipment harder and closer to its limit. And with all the changes they made with the bodywork, the chassis, the engine, they did certain things more aggressive, certain things more mellow, but they brought that all together in a package that I feel like can make any rider more confident on the track.